Hey friends, in this video, we'll get to know the men and women who have earned the respect or hatred of the strongest creature on Earth. Yujiro Hanma stands as the pinnacle of physical strength and the ultimate representation of martial arts. Any person hungry for victory aspires to be like him, which is why earning his respect is something only a lucky few can boast about. In this video, we'll look at those who have earned his admiration and respect. So, without further ado, let's analyze this list and see which characters the ogre respects the most. I had to start the list with Yujiro's father, because from what little we know, we can assume Yujiro respected him. Yujiro didn't like his father's peaceful and calm attitude, that's why he said they were very different. However, as a fighter, Yujiro was the only one above him, at least up to a certain point in the story. Yujiro was the first man to defeat the United States, and as we all know, Yujiro followed in his footsteps years later, and also defeated the United States on his own. It's as if Yujiro was saying, "Anything you can do, I can do better." Another moment where Yujiro shows his admiration for his father is during his fight with Baki, right after Yujiro appeared in the middle of the fight. On that occasion, Yujiro used his father's favorite technique and named it the dress technique. It is likely that Yujiro taught this technique to his son Yujiro in the same way that the ogre did with Baki. There aren't scenes where we see them interact, but from what little we know, we can theorize that Yujiro was the main reason Yujiro decided to become the world's strongest man. General Stredham is seen as one of Yujiro's closest friends, and this is because the ogre considers him a strong and brave man. Both have a contract according to which, once a year, Stredham must hunt Yujiro. If the general manages to entertain Yujiro, their friendship will continue for another year. However, if he disappoints him, their friendship will end. Yujiro and the general met many years ago. At that time, the United States was trying to exterminate the ogre, and they assigned this mission to Stredham. Of course, the general couldn't carry out the task as capturing the ogre proved impossible. During that time, the general met Yujiro in person and by sheer luck managed to return to the United States alive. Since then, the two have been quite close, and from time to time, they can be seen sharing a drink or walking around town while discussing topics of interest. Emi was Yujiro's wife and Baki's mother. Yujiro specifically chose her to be the mother of his child because he saw that she was just like him. Both enjoyed witnessing the suffering of others and had a heart thirsty for destruction. Emi repressed these feelings, but when she met Yujiro, she began to be true to herself. Both had a different concept of love, but somehow they coincided in other aspects. The moment when Yujiro recognized Emi as a tough woman was when he was fighting with Baki, and she intervened to save her son's life. Yujiro acknowledged Emi's bravery, as even though she stood no chance of even scratching him, she sacrificed herself so her son could live. Diane Neal met Yujiro during the Vietnam conflict, and at that time, the ogre accepted her as his partner because he saw that she was a tough and strong woman. However, she later earned his hatred when Yujiro discovered that she was a government spy and was on a mission to eliminate him. We all know what Yujiro did after discovering his betrayal, so we can say that he truly earned Yujiro's respect and contempt at the same time. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if Yujiro had chosen Diane as his wife instead of Emi. Maybe Jack would have been born with perfect blood, since he would have been a wanted and planned child. The Hanma blood works in mysterious ways, so anything's possible. We know that Ando is an old friend of the ogre, but we are not sure how close they were in the past, as they never met again. But the fact that Yujiro introduced him to his son Baki makes me think that Yujiro at least regarded him as a brave and tenacious man. Ando was willing to sacrifice himself to save Baki, so he undoubtedly deserves the ogre's respect. This man earned Yujiro's respect and admiration due to his fight against society. Yujiro saw him not just as a great fighter, but also as a warrior who stood up for the weak. That's why the ogre personally visited him, expressing his admiration after shaking his hand. Yujiro even went to visit the boxer's son and told him that he hoped the boy would be a worthy opponent for his sons in the future. Needless to say, this man was an expert boxer and one of the best fighters on the planet, having created his own martial art based on boxing. Yujiro told him that his martial art was good, but needed to be perfected. Next on the list is Ali Jr., the son of the man we talked about a few seconds ago. This young boxer also bore his father's name and was equally skilled, if not better, at boxing. Yujiro showed interest in him when they met after several years. The ogre wanted to see how Junior would handle the technique that defeated his father, but the young man declined the offer and left, leaving Yujiro utterly humiliated. This act made Yujiro despise him and his martial arts philosophy. It's also worth noting that the ogre was present when Baki humiliated Junior in a matter of seconds. So, after witnessing that fight, Yujiro likely felt only pity and disgust for Junior, as he had hoped he would match his father's skills, but turned out to be a huge disappointment. Yanagi is another character who earned Yujiro's contempt. The ogre appeared after the criminal was defeated by Matabe, telling him it was best to accept defeat. Yanagi did not acknowledge his defeat, and even told Yujiro that it was not his decision. Obviously, it was a big mistake, and Yujiro responded with a punch that literally wiped out half of his face. This man heavily relied on his weapons. But what disappointed Yujiro the most was that even after being brought to his knees, he refused to accept his defeat. Emperor Kaku showed Yujiro the power of Chinese martial arts, and taught him that even an old man over 100 years old could be a worthy opponent, because even though his body ages, Chinese martial arts are eternal. He is one of the few characters who gave Yujiro a good fight. He wasn't defeated in just a few seconds. In fact, he forced the ogre to activate his demon back to end the fight. After the fight, the old man acknowledged Yujiro as a worthy bearer of the title Emperor of the Sea. Yujiro also praised the old man's strength and told him that he admired him for practicing martial arts for over a century. Dr. Kuroha seemed to be an interesting fighter in Yujiro's eyes. However, after losing to Baki, he no longer saw him as a potential opponent. In fact, when Yujiro entered the underground arena and challenged all the fighters, Kuroha didn't dare confront him and ended up cornered by the ogre. If it weren't for his brother, Yujiro would have likely annihilated him right there. Yujiro doesn't hate him, but he doesn't consider him an opponent worthy of his attention either. On the other hand, Kosho was a genuine surprise as he fearlessly stood up to the ogre and challenged him to fight. Kosho even managed to dodge a punch from Yujiro, and it is important to note that Yujiro's attack was thrown with his full strength. Without a doubt, at that moment, Kosho was above his brother in Yujiro's eyes. Few men have managed to dodge a punch from Yujiro at that speed, so Kosho is definitely not a man to be underestimated. Oliva Biscuit is considered as the strongest man in America, and at one point he was considered the second most dangerous man in the world, only behind Yujiro Hanma. The ogre acknowledges Mr. Unchained's strength, and they meet from time to time to discuss various topics. Yujiro seems to have a certain respect and admiration for Mr. Unchained, and he's also grateful to him for playing a part in Baki's development. Remember, Baki challenged Biscuit because he saw him as the man who came closest to Yujiro in strength. Undoubtedly, the Unchained is one of the fighters that the ogre respects for his strength and fighting philosophy. What Yujiro most admires about this man must be his evolution, without even practicing martial arts. The prehistoric caveman caught Yujiro's attention from the moment he learned about him. The ogre likely saw that TV broadcast and felt a strong desire to meet Pickle in person. Yujiro went to Pickle and challenged him to a contest of brute force. On that occasion, the caveman overcame Yujiro's strength for a few seconds and almost managed to knock him down, but the ogre used a technique and managed to defeat the caveman at the last moment. Yujiro was quite excited to feel Pickle's power, as he felt that this guy really had immense potential. During the father versus son fight, Pickle suddenly appeared, and Yujiro was happy to see him again. Like other fighters, Yujiro respects the fact that Pickle survived in a world ruled by the biggest and most dangerous creatures in history. Yujiro is probably also envious that Pickle managed to have fun with those dangerous creatures in the past. Yasha was a creature that lived in the mountains, and was one of the toughest opponents Baki has ever fought. However, for Yujiro, this creature was just like any other jungle animal, and he showed him no respect when he went hunting for him. Yujiro even brought the creature's head to Baki to anger him. In this way, he proved to him that this creature was never a real threat. It's as if telling him that all his training in the mountains was nothing more than child's play. Gaia was presented as an elite super soldier, and General Stridon went so far as to compare him to Yujiro Hanma. This was clearly an exaggeration by the general, and Yujiro proved it when he defeated him with ease. Although the fight was not shown, it was evident that it was a total humiliation because after the fight Yujiro treated Gaia as his servant. The ogre forced him to bow to him, and thus made it clear that Stridum's comparisons were nothing more than a bad joke. Probably the ogre didn't even consider him as an entertaining opponent. Yujiro always saw Katsumi as a spoiled child and told him to his face on the occasion when they met at the military base where Pickle was held captive. Yujiro humiliated him by moving faster than him, quickly removing his shoelaces and throwing them in his face. Yujiro told him that the only reason he had dared to challenge him was that he knew his father and the others present would not let him die. Yujiro never liked Katsumi and never showed him the slightest respect. However, it would be interesting to know what Yujiro thinks of him after seeing all the development he's had since their last encounter. Hanayama genuinely earned Yujiro's respect. Remember that at the beginning of the series, Yujiro did not consider him an interesting fighter to meet. However, as the story progressed, Yujiro observed that Hanayama had immense potential and might become a worthy adversary someday. Yujiro himself told him that they were similar, as both were born to be strong. Hanayama was born with great strength and never needed rigorous training to become strong. It has been revealed that he trains on special occasions, but unlike other fighters, he doesn't need to train for long periods to keep getting stronger. Yujiro has defeated him several times, but he never came to despise him. In fact, the more he tries to beat him, the more respect Yujiro feels for him. Jack is Yujiro's unwanted son, but when they met, Yujiro felt a genuine interest in him. Yujiro knew that Jack used chemicals to become stronger, but he didn't care about that. For him, the only thing that truly mattered was strength, not the means to achieve it. Unfortunately, after Jack lost to Baki, he decided to confront his father and challenged him to a fight. Yujiro obviously defeated him in an instant, but the worst part was that the ogre told him he was a complete disappointment and was no longer interested in him. Yujiro lost all respect for Jack and never again considered him a worthy opponent. Later in the story, Yujiro mentions that Jack's blood isn't pure, and that's why he'll never be on the same level as Baki. Jack's mission has not changed, and he is still waiting for the day when he can finally confront his father and get revenge for what he did to his mother. I've always found it curious that Yujiro met with Sikorsky instead of any of the other 5 convicts. The ogre probably felt some interest in the Russian, which is why he explained how to provoke Baki's anger. However, after all the events and learning that Sikorsky was defeated in several times, Yujiro probably must have laughed at him and realized that the guy was never worth it. Even his flawed creation Jack managed to defeat him with ease, so Yujiro's level of respect for him must be 0. We could say that Yujiro simply used this guy to provoke Baki. Amanai was the only man that Yujiro accepted as his disciple. He was a presidential bodyguard, and Yujiro took an interest in him because of his extensive knowledge of martial arts and his unique life philosophy. Yujiro even allowed him to slap him and didn't get angry about it. The level of respect Yujiro had for that guy had to be incredibly high to let him do something like that in front of Baki and the others. However, all praises ended when he couldn't defeat Doppo. The ogre became so furious that he went down to the arena and gave him a beating in front of everyone. From that point on, we heard nothing more about this character. It's known that he survived, but no one knows if he continued practicing martial arts. It's interesting how this guy went from being Yujiro's disciple to being a complete joke to him. Retsu's master left everyone wondering about his true potential. He lost to Yujiro in a humiliating manner within seconds. I don't believe this guy is weak. The thing is, he had to fight the final boss at the beginning of the game. For Yujiro, Chinese martial arts were a joke at that time, and he completely mocked Ryu Kaio. Without a doubt, this man didn't earn even the slightest bit of respect from the ogre. On the other hand, Yujiro's relationship with Retsu is somewhat peculiar, as the ogre always teased him when they were face to face. However, I believe Yujiro was somewhat curious about him, since he was always up for a fight when Retsu confronted him. They never had a fight, but if they had, I believe Retsu would have performed better than his master. Politicians and presidents are the people Yujiro despises the most. On several occasions, he has been seen humiliating the presidents of the world's most powerful nations. The ogre even used George Bush's presidential limousine as if it was a taxi to ride around the city. He hates the idea of such weak and lying individuals running an entire country, and has demonstrated this by having all presidents sign a non-aggression pact with him. Mothobe is another guy Yujiro can't stand because he ruined one of the most important fights of his life. The legendary swordsman Musashi Miyamoto was about to deliver his best strike to Yujiro, but Mothobe stepped in and took the hit. Yujiro was so furious that he started attacking him even though he was unconscious. This was a fight he had been looking forward to, and now it was ruined. Let's not forget the time he visited the ogre and told him he would protect him from Musashi. Yujiro exploded in anger and almost destroyed the building after realizing that Mothobe had escaped from the place. We haven't seen another interaction between these two, but I'd love to know what Yujiro currently thinks about the man who ruined one of the best fights of his life. The sumo god dared to summon Yujiro to the underground arena for a fight. The thing is, Yujiro was not in Japan at the time, and when he arrived at the arena, he was very irritated. Nomi was very excited and offered a handshake as a sign of respect, which was clearly an insult to Yujiro, who knocked him down with a simple move. After that, Yujiro gave him a powerful punch to the face, leaving him knocked out in the middle of the arena. Yujiro probably also heard that Baki and Jack humiliatingly defeated Nomi, which made him feel even more contempt for him. Another sumo fighter who crossed paths with Yujiro was Kahaya, a guy who boasted about having the fastest kicks in the world. However, when Yujiro met with him, he proved him very wrong. The ogre practically mocked Kahaya, demonstrating that being fast isn't enough if you don't know how to strike correctly. Kahaya fled the scene, realizing that if he continued the confrontation, he'd likely end up with multiple broken bones. Later on, this guy was utterly humiliated by Doppo, and it's safe to say Mitsunari told Yujiro about it. Yujiro probably felt pity and shame for him. Thanks to Nomi and Kahaya, it is likely that now the ogre has no interest in ancient sumo. When Yujiro was preparing to fight Baki for the first time, he decided to visit one of the best archers in the world. Yujiro wanted to test his own abilities against this man, so he asked him to shoot an arrow at close range. It seemed somewhat impossible to stop an arrow at that distance, but for Yujiro it was no problem at all. The fact that Yujiro went looking for this man to test him meant that he knew him and knew that he was very good with the arrow and bow. Another woman who earned Yujiro's respect and admiration was Kosue, Baki's girlfriend. Yujiro recognized her as a strong and brave woman, and he admitted she was the perfect partner for his son Baki. Also worth noting is the time she stepped in during the father versus son fight, trying to stop them. She didn't succeed, but Yujiro commended her courage. Mitsunari is undoubtedly one of Yujiro's best friends. They've known each other for a long time and seem to have a good relationship. In fact, one of Yujiro's most frequent visits is to Mitsunari's mansion where they talk and have a couple of drinks. The ogre has become concerned about the old man's health, advising him to see a doctor before his condition worsens. He also sometimes insults and intimidates him, but despite this he still considers him one of his closest friends. Doppo can be considered one of Yujiro's main rivals due to the extensive history between the two. When the ogre learned that this man was nicknamed the God of War, he sought him out and found him while celebrating his birthday party. Yujiro hit Doppo, ruining his night, but before leaving he expressed how disappointed he was with him. Since then, the two have shared a prolonged rivalry. They faced off in the underground arena, and to everyone's surprise, Doppo gave Yujiro a good fight, even forcing him to use the demon back. Doppo survived that battle, and Yujiro acknowledged him as a warrior worthy of respect. Occasionally, they walk together through the streets of Tokyo and grab a drink at a nearby bar. Yujiro trusts Doppo deeply and has revealed to him how much he loves his son, Baki. They both have sons who have also become martial arts lovers. Based on the series, I believe that Doppo has become a close friend of Yujiro. The legendary swordsman is a highly respected figure in Japan. Everyone knows his legend. That's why, when he was resurrected, Yujiro personally went to meet him, wanting to verify if this was the real Musashi or just a cheap imitation. Yujiro was greatly surprised as Musashi withstood all of his attacks and remained standing even after the ogre unleashed his full power. Yujiro even activated his demon back, knowing this wasn't an ordinary opponent. Unfortunately, the fight didn't end as everyone expected, leaving us with uncertainty about the possible winner. Yujiro and Musashi went for a walk together in the city. The ogre acknowledged Musashi's strength and accepted the fact that the legendary swordsman was the only man on par with him. Years of living in the midst of war had molded the swordsman into a human weapon. There was nothing he couldn't cut. Up to that point in the story, we can say that Musashi is the closest character to Yujiro in terms of power. Without a doubt, this man earned the respect and admiration of the strongest creature on Earth. And finally, Baki Hanma, the strongest man in the world. Without a doubt, Baki earned his father's respect in the best possible way by giving him one of the best fights of his life. These two share a unique father-son relationship, and when they want to solve their problems, they do it the only way they know how, with their fists. Yujiro was the cause of his son's greatest traumas, but despite that he truly loves him from the bottom of his heart. Yujiro himself has mentioned that he thinks about Baki all day long and is always curious about what the boy will do next. Sometimes it seemed that Yujiro hated Baki, but after analyzing the series more deeply, I realized that the ogre has his own concept of love, which he continuously shows to his son. Yujiro's greatest sign of respect towards Baki was when he declared him the strongest man in the world during their epic battle. They might be an unconventional family, but the mutual respect they have for each other is undeniable. Well, I might have forgotten some characters, but if they're not on this list, it's because I believe they didn't have enough interactions with Yujiro to be included in the video. If you think I missed any character, please let me know. And remember, you can also leave your questions and suggestions for future videos in the comment box. And well, friends, thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to subscribe if you liked it. I hope you have a nice day or night. See you soon.